Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 4 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we discuss business agility through customer experience, employee experience, and digital transformation. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom. The Agile World podcast is brought to you by TechSystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to techsystems.com. To read more about the topics discussed on this show, you can go to my website at gregkihlstrom.com and read my latest articles or get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, now available on Amazon and other retailers. My name is Greg Kihlstrom, and I'm the host of the Agile Brand podcast. Today we're going to talk about CX skeptics and how to win them over to adopting customer-centric thinking in a meaningful way. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Sami Nuwar, Customer Experience Advisory at Medallia. Sami, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, looking forward to talk about this. I know we're both passionate about this subject, so I'm really looking forward to diving in. But first, why don't we start by you giving a little background on yourself and what you're currently doing at Medallia?
Yeah, sure. I'm essentially a consultant at Medallia. I used to be a practitioner. I spent 20 years creating and managing my own experience management programs at large B2B companies. And a few years ago, I decided to jump over to the supply side so that it's an exciting opportunity because I get to do the same work, but the difference being rather than doing it for one company or two companies, I'm doing it for multiple companies. I'm helping other companies kind of wade through the waters.
Yeah, love it. Well, yeah, let's dive in here, and so we'll start by talking about what I mentioned at the top of the show: how to win over CX skeptics and ensure an organization is able to make a more meaningful shift towards customer centricity. With the obvious benefit of, at least obvious to us, the obvious benefit to customers, to employees, and to the business itself. So what do you think is the reason behind skepticism with, that a focus on CX or a move towards greater customer centricity will bring, changes to an organization?
Yeah, I think there are a few reasons, but I'll just kind of give you like the primary reason that I think is, just a prevalent cause of this. And I think there's purely a lack of understanding of what experience management and what CX really is, and why we're doing this. I think, there's some misperception that if we have a survey and we have data available on dashboards, then the business will magically improve. And I think that's a common misperception that I hear. Of course, collection methods and reporting methods are core components of a program. They're essential. I would say they're fundamental. You got to measure the progress, the work that you're doing, and then show it to people, make it available. But at the same time, you've got to, combine those disciplines with a host of other disciplines that help to drive the necessary change so that those numbers actually, move in the right direction.
As with most elements of change, because I think, what we're talking about is organizations that at least some within the organization understand the need to shift towards more, of a CX focus and customer centricity. But, as with any element of change, there's 3 components, right? So there's people, process, and technology. So even though the latter, technology seems to be the most complex, in my experience, and potentially yours, I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's often the people component that causes the biggest challenge to roadblocks to success. So, we'll talk about the right way to do things in a minute, but you and I spoke before the show as we were prepping for this, and you'd mentioned that organizations are, often well-intentioned and almost in every case well-intentioned, but they tend to approach things in ways that can often fail to gain engagement and even to motivate employees to make a shift. So, what are some of these approaches that, while well intentioned, could sometimes cause more harm than good?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I would say that the most common oversight that I've experienced in my time as a practitioner, and I've also seen in other programs that I help consult with, is I see a lack of active leadership participation, and I use those three words very deliberately. Active meaning um, not passive, meaning you're either on the field of play getting your hands dirty or you're not. And leadership, meaning I use that word pretty loosely. It doesn't always have to be executive leadership, but it often does include them. But they should be leaders at all levels of management, regardless of title. They need to engage. So starting with the top, all the way on down to the individual contributors and the people in between need to be engaged and actively engaged. And then that last word, participation. What does that really mean? It really means that we've taken the time to fully define and articulate each organization's role, starting with the top leader in the organization. Everybody has a purpose, and I see organizations, and I've lived it too, where those three words were not always true. Active leadership participation throughout the business just wasn't always the case.
So, for those leaders that, let's say the leaders that are more actively participating, how can they then work to gain buy-in and adoption towards customer-centric culture and um, with their employees? Again, they're trying to do the right thing. They're being more
Right.
active in it, and yet having some struggles in um, in getting activation from the employee side. Do you have
Yeah.
maybe an example you could share?
Yeah, there's so much that leaders can do at all levels. One kind of axiom that I kind of stress to clients that I work with is that the people in the organization take their cues. They take their behavioral cues from their executive leaders, from their leadership. And when we hear our CEO or our COO talk about customer experience in a meaningful way, it resonates. It resonates through all layers of management, and when we see them exhibiting certain behaviors, or we hear our leaders exhibiting certain behaviors or saying certain things, we tend to emulate them. I've always thought that the organization and the organizational behavior is a reflection of the leadership behavior and a leadership mindset. And in experience management, it's no different. So there's so much that could be done. It's just exhibiting and being vocal and being visible about the commitment to the experience management program, and make sure we say and do the right things that we essentially want other people to do and say as well. I'll give you a perfect example of that. The CEO, I can't mention the company name, but there's a large technology company. They make components for computers and other technology, but mostly PCs. Pretty famous company. And the CEO, a new CEO, just coming on board to that company, hosted a leadership meeting covering the usual business topics. Essentially, our inaugural business review. We're going to cover the usual topics of performance around profitability and so on and so forth. And so he called all of his direct reports, obviously, to the meeting, and you're going to do a dog and pony show and present to me. And so everybody came on board, excited to meet this new CEO. And the very first question he asked of them in each of their business unit reviews was, "Tell me what you're hearing about. Oh, tell me what you're hearing from our customers. What are they telling you? And what are we doing to manage their experience?" And of course, people were kind of dancing around the question because they truthfully didn't have an answer to it.
Yeah.
But that moment kind of gave people the trigger for the next time we have a business review, the next time we meet, or the next time I talk to the CEO. I damn sure should have an answer, a clear answer to this question, because it's going to keep coming. So
Yeah.
it changed the mindset, starting with the top down. And that question that he asked of all of his direct reports in that day sent the signal. And essentially, their CX program, which had existed, they were measuring the experience, but nobody was paying attention. And it probably wasn't done very effectively. Their program shifted from a pet project to part of the company's DNA overnight.
From the leader, that's a constructive way of asking that question, as opposed to dictating exactly how something has to get done, and stuff like that. It's a constructive way of, like, almost like, you tell me how you're going to do it, and find a way to solve that problem, right? So it's
Yeah.
I mean, I always think that there is this dynamic between, it's got to be leadership. To your point, like, leadership needs to take that leading role in things, but it also, like, employees need to feel like they're driving change too. So it's a delicate balancing act, right?
Yeah, it is for
Yeah.
sure.
So let's switch gears here for a little bit, to another topic, that's extremely important, especially once you're a little further along and you've got teams that are on board with CX initiatives. CX governance. So first, from your perspective, how do you define CX governance?
It's a term that's thrown around so much in our profession. Um, it's a common buzzword that's not always clearly stated or clearly defined. A few of my Medallia colleagues, we met to discuss this topic. Like, it's thrown around a lot. Like, how would we define it? We all have our own individual definitions based on our own experiences.
Yeah.
But if we had to come up with a collective definition that we would all agree with and can, espouse to other people, like, what would it be? And so, we think of governance as a systematic process where a group of people can hold each other accountable to drive some sort of change, hopefully for the better. And by driving that change, we can track the progress of the company and of the work that we're doing to ensure that we're moving in the right direction. So, to us, the key words to remember are accountable, change, and progress. Those three words. And at the end of the day, it's a management system composed of people and process. And what we're managing is the progress of the work that we're doing to drive some sort of change.
Why is it so important to have this in place? Again,
Yeah.
it's one thing to understand the importance of CX, and even to be able to measure its effects, but why is it so important to have CX governance in place, and follow on to that, even, what are some of the costs of not having it?
Oh yeah. I can answer both questions with one word, and that's alignment.
Yeah.
It's
Nice.
alignment, and actually in my previous life when I was a practitioner, I never used the word governance. Like, it actually scared people. They thought it was
Yeah.
like the Big Brother thing, and I'm like, no, dude, we're not here to watch what you're doing, but I am here to ask ourselves some pointed questions, like, what are we doing, and how do we know what's working? Um, and so alignment is what I called my governance program. That's the word I used, and that's the one word that I would use to describe why is it so important, so that we can align. We align on many things. First of all, we align on our purpose, like, why do we exist, and what is the direction we intend to go. So let's align on that. Make sure we're all on the same page, and then we also align, just as I alluded to before, we align on the work that we are doing or intend to do across all business functions. We're so busy executing, right? And that's not a bad thing. We want execution. But at the same time, we need to give ourselves permission to take a step back every once in a while, periodically, retrospectively assess our progress on a cross functional basis, and understand, okay, I see Joey in finance is working on something, and Julie in billing and another part of the company is working on something too, and I can see that their projects are separate and distinct and managed but in their own individual silos,
Yeah.
but I see a lot of similarities. I see a lot of commonalities in terms of what they're each addressing separately. Maybe they can combine their effort, or maybe we could, um, kill one project and put those resources toward the other project and expand our scope. And so, those are the types of questions that we want our leaders to and management. owners to ask themselves. But it's hard to do that when you don't come together periodically and align on the work, and make sure that that work aligns to the purpose, so that we're all going in the same direction. And ask ourselves what else can we do, and why not do something else, or align resources according to things that we're doing. So it's just like a car. We're driving in our cars every day, and every once in a while, well, the steering wheel points us in the right direction, right? That's our
Right.
North Star is guided by the steering wheel. And every once in a while, we're going to hit a pothole or a bump, and it's going to cause our alignment in the car to not be aligned with the steering wheel. And every once in a while, you're going to see the car start to drift left or right, even though you pointed in a certain direction.
Yeah.
And that's why we take our cars in to get some maintenance done every 3 months, right? Every 3 months, you have a schedule to take your car in to get your oil changed, to get your tires rotated, and align and get a realignment, and that makes sure that your steering wheel is pointed in a direction, or make sure that the wheels of the car are pointed in a direction of the steering wheel.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
business is no different than that.
In terms of alignment, are you seeing any trends, or there's a lot of different ways to make this work, right? So there's, I've seen working like CX working groups and steering committees, centers of excellence, departments, CX departments, divisions, things like that. Like, are you seeing anything in the in the industries and kind of company sizes that are trends, or even things that tend to work better than others in this regard?
The main thing that I see is, there has to be an infrastructure in place for us to, if we're going to get together and align on things, we're going to, periodically get together and talk about the work and the progress of the work and the impact of the work. Then we need some tool, we need some infrastructure that can help us, facilitate those discussions and do it, um, uh, in a positive way, not to beat anybody over the head about lack of progress, but to encourage them and maybe
Yeah.
ask them what they need in terms of resources. So, I've always thought that technology or tools they're meant to facilitate an environment for us to make progress on things, not to hinder progress.
Right.
And I don't see enough tools out there that can help companies do that. And so I think when there's a lack of technology or a tool that's got a purpose around it, then people adapt existing tools to the certain need. So when I was a practitioner, I used SharePoint, Smartsheet. I used whatever tool I can get my hands on to keep track of the work, document properly, but also do it in a sort of central repository where it's not only accessible to me, but it's also accessible to others in the business so that they have the same visibility that I do. And that's something that I think has been missing. I'm seeing improvements in the industry around purpose-built tools for this, but I haven't seen enough quite yet. I think Medallia's got a couple of answers to that need, but they're not, by any means perfect. They're definitely better than nothing, but there are a few tweaks that even Medallia could apply in that sense.
How would you recommend an organization that may be struggling to get started in moving in the right direction? Maybe they're stuck, or where how do they get started in moving in the right direction?
Yeah. I think regardless of where you are in your program maturity, whether you're just getting started or whether you've been doing this for 10 years and are relatively mature or maybe looking to go to the next level, I think there's one question you can ask yourself, and that's, why do we exist? Like, what's the purpose? Understand what the purpose of the program is. Write it down and then communicate it to everyone as often as possible. I think that's the one question. I mean, if I were just getting started in if I got hired tomorrow to a program that's just getting started or is mature, that's the question I would ask. It's a challenging question. It sounds simple, but oftentimes can be difficult to answer. Um, And it sounds like a minor step too, because maybe we should be able to answer why we exist. But you'd be surprised how often the answer might vary depending on who you're talking to in an organization. I can give you an example of the power of that, of being able to answer that question
Yeah, that'd be great.
from my past. I was at American Bath Group, which is a bathware products manufacturer. So the governance structure at that company was relatively easy to establish. The the CX program. I came on board when there was nothing there, so I came on board and to establish a CX program, and it grew relatively quickly and had a lot of success in a short amount of time. Um, but and we had taken the time to define our purpose. But our program's purpose was really built from the company's purpose. And so I'll paraphrase the company's purpose for you briefly. I'm not going to get it perfectly right word for word, but I can
Right.
paraphrase it because it's pretty easy to remember. The company's purpose was a commitment to make to make the lives of people better. It was as simple as that, and that was the company's purpose. We want to make people's lives better, and it backed up that purpose with the sort of follow-on statement. Um, of course, we make bathware products and we sell bathware products, so we need to make a profit off of those bathware products. But baked into that purpose and the company's DNA was the fact that it shared a percentage of its profits to local charities and community events. So our purpose is not to make products and sell products. Our purpose is to make people's lives better. We just happen to do that by making products and making a profit that we give back to the community. And taking that company purpose helped me establish the CX program's purpose, and therefore help people understand why this program exists.
Well, one last question before we wrap up here. For those that want to learn more about this, dive in deeper, do you have any recommendations for something that they can read, watch, or listen to that talks about some of the things we discussed today?
Oh yeah, I've got. There's so much content out there. First of all, you got to start with the Agile Brand podcast.
Of course, of course.
You've
Thank
got to
you.
listen to this podcast. But aside from that, if you had to pick up a book, if you're a bookworm like me, I would say the most important book. I should get royalties from this guy, but because I talk about it a lot, and it's really helped me in my career, and it could help anyone because the content is so accessible and so easy to understand. There's a book called Primed to Perform. Um, you could Google the author. His name is Neil Doshi, Neel Doshi, Doshi. He's a um, he co-authored the book Primed to Perform. It's essentially he took a bunch of sociology experiments that were famous in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, psychology and sociology experiments, and he and his co-author recreated them. They sort of retested these experiments, and then they applied the learnings from those experiments to our working environments and how we think and how we talk and how we work with each other. The fundamental question that they wanted to answer in that book is um, what motivates people? How do we motivate teams or people? And they do a really good job of articulating the things that motivate or demotivate people. And I think that's found an amazing book that's really well written, and it's the way they write it too that just makes it understandable for the layperson. You don't have to be a sociologist or a scientist to get it. It's so easy to apply.
Nice.
I'd say the other two books that I give you is Human Sigma and Hug Your Haters are the other two books that I would say are must reads.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I gotta check out. I never read Prime to Perform. I'll have to check that out. Nice, nice. Well, thanks, Sami. Thanks so much for joining the show. For those listening, what's the best way for them to keep up with what you're doing?
I would say check me out on LinkedIn. Send me an email, snuwar@medallia.com. And, if you need help or want to talk CX or change management or anything related to business, I'm happy to do so.
Well, again, I'd like to thank Sami Nuwar, Customer Experience Advisor at Medallia, for joining the show. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom. Talk with you next week. Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.theagilebrand.show. To get a copy of my latest book, Meaningful Measurement of the Customer Experience, visit my website at gregkihlstrom.com. Until next week, stay agile.